Up next on Eco Company.
We've seen a lot of things. But a boat made of plastic?
So go ahead and grab that and
Alrighty, my tool.
have fun.
All right.
Adam hops in for a ride to learn more about the trash polluting our oceans.
Then, stories that will shock you. Marine mammals injured by our trash.
We get a disturbingly high number of animals that have been injured by marine debris.
This team's on a mission to keep these guys happy and healthy.
And our oceans heating up?
If you're not really measuring the warming of the oceans, you really aren't measuring the biggest signal in climate change.
A NASA scientist explains what it could mean for the entire ecosystem.
All that and more.
On Eco Company, starting right now. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Eco Company. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Josh. This week, we're reporting from across McCovey Cove, home of the San Francisco Giants.
This cove, named after Giants great Willie McCovey, has become famous for the home runs that leave the park and splash into the waters.
But you know, our oceans and other bodies of water are becoming famous for catching something else entirely, our trash.
Adam met up with a group of researchers to find out just how bad the situation is.
So guys, this is a first for me. I'm sitting on a boat made of plastic bottles. Now, plastic is a major problem in our oceans, and we're meeting with some crusaders who want everyone to know about it.
So we just came across another windrow.
Meet Anna Cummins and Marcus Erickson. These two marine researchers are sailing the world's oceans, but they're not looking for treasure, they're looking for trash.
We're chasing junk in the water.
We've been seeing tons of bottle caps, shotgun shell, a boot.
This is exactly the kind of stuff these guys don't like to see, and why they're researchers for the nonprofit Algalita Marine Research Foundation.
The mission of the Algalita Foundation is research and education. So we go to the Pacific and we study what's out there. We come back and we tell the world.
This is the North Pacific Garbage Patch, where trash collects in the middle of the ocean. But it's not the only so-called gyre out there.
This is 45 minutes of scooping through another windrow in the middle of the Sargasso Sea. I think we found the Atlantic garbage patch.
Eric and Anna are studying all of them through their project, 5 Gyres.
Now look at this plastic bottle. Now we find these all around the North Atlantic gyre, bits of plastics chewed on by marine life.
I wish the rest of the world could see this, to see that the human footprint is everywhere on the planet. Everywhere you go, from North Pole, South Pole, in the middle of every ocean, you will see the human footprint.
I was absolutely shocked when our first couple trawls came in. We collected now in the North Pacific Ocean, the North Atlantic Ocean, and the Indian Ocean. We've collected over 100 trawls, and every single one of them had plastic in it.
Here's the problem with plastic.
Plastic is a petroleum product. It's non-biodegradable. It was designed to last forever, but we're now finding that that's coming back to haunt us in ways people never predicted. It won't break down, but it will photodegrade. So the sunlight and the wave action will break it into these tiny, small pieces that are now becoming a huge problem because animals eat it. Animals get entangled in it. We're now finding it winds up in the food chain, and it's having devastating impacts on our marine ecosystems.
You got a fish? Yeah. So we just pulled out this plastic bucket, and we found a triggerfish inside that's so big that it looks like it can't get out.
But fortunately for this guy, Anna and Marcus saved the day.
There we go. Oh my God.
Still alive.
Back in the Algalita lab, Marcus and Anna show us that the situation's not much better in oceans across the globe.
What you're looking at here is 3 different samples from 3 oceans. This is a sample from the North Pacific gyre, this is the North Atlantic gyre, and this is the Indian Ocean.
When you sail across the oceans, you see that it's basically this, a confetti of small plastic fragments.
Here is 0.7 millimeters. I don't know if you can see that one. That is really small.
Ann Zellers is an Algalita researcher.
You can see the plastic in there floating.
Once samples come back to the lab, contents are sifted and then dumped into a petri dish. Then it goes under a microscope that can spot even the tiniest pieces. She sorts through it all and takes the plastic out, piece by piece.
It's cataloged by fragment, foam, pellet, line, or film. We use it as ammunition to help us argue the point that plastic needs to be made so it's biodegradable.
This is one of the most commonly found plastics,
Everything that's plastic starts out as a pellet. What makes one piece of plastic different from another piece of plastic is the additives that they put into these pellets.
And what you might not realize is that this plastic also carries chemicals with it.
Plastic in the ocean acts as a sponge, like a magnet for chemicals like PCBs, pesticides, oil drops from our car, toxic chemicals. These chemicals don't mix with water, but they stick to plastic like a sponge. We know that fish are eating these plastic particles. We know bigger fish eat lots of those little fish, and we eat those bigger fish. So the question is now, what's getting into our sushi? What's winding up in our bodies?
Concerned about the impact to our food chain, Anna's even been tested to see what chemicals might be present in her body.
We looked into my body and we found that I have trace levels in my blood of PCBs, DDT, flame retardants, and PFCs. And these are all chemicals that are linked to reproductive disorders and birth defects and miscarriages and obesity and all kinds of issues.
While the link between plastic, chemicals, and our food chain isn't firmly established, they're working on it.
These are gyre samples from around the world. These are the Atlantic, there are some from the Pacific.
And they've got a lot of material to keep them busy. Finding out just how much of this stuff fish are eating is another piece of the puzzle they're trying to solve.
With these fish, we're going to look in their stomachs and see if they've ingested plastic. Then the next step is to look into the tissues of these fish and find out, is there a link between the number of plastic particles they've eaten and the chemicals in their tissue.
And we're not just talking fish. Birds are being impacted too.
So now what are we looking at here?
Well, now that you've touched it, we can tell you that this is a bird barf from a Laysan albatross. But don't worry, it's been sterilized and clean, because when that first comes out of a bird's stomach, it's the foulest thing you've ever smelled.
I'll bet.
What they're consuming mostly is plastic, these plastic pieces. We've seen many lighters, even medical waste, syringes inside their bodies.
All this is not a pretty picture for our oceans and the life that rely on them to survive.
One study, 44% of seabird species either ingest or get entangled by plastic.
44%.
44% of seabird species.
The question is, what can we do to turn the tide?
Our throwaway society has to change. We can't think that when you consume a material and you throw it away, that it disappears. There is no away and throw away. The material goes somewhere. We've designed this little milk jug ring here. I mean, there is no recycle plan for this. We've got to make it benign by design. We can't keep using petroleum plastic for throwaway products. There are materials that we can make bags and cup lids and forks and knives out of that degrade in the ocean if they get to the ocean.
It's a message they're taking to young people too. They visit about 50 to 60 schools every year.
Kids get it. They have a natural sense of justice. They love animals. They love clean beaches. They love the environment and nature.
That brings us to this boat, built with the help of some high school students.
So this is the Kola kayak. Tell me about this boat.
So this boat was built by the students of the Environmental Charter High School. We work with several schools to do different public projects, including boat building.
It's made out of 170 plastic bottles. Plastic bags were used to make the rope.
Well, this is to let people know that this is where ocean trash comes from. It begins here on land, washes out to the ocean, so solutions are here, not there.
Because out there, the damage is already done.
Do you want to take out for a little spin?
Let's take it for a spin.
The big message here?
The planet cares for us. It gives us air, food, and water that we need to survive. We have to care for those systems. If we don't, we are going to suffer. How was that?
That was awesome. Thank you.
Coming up next, mixing up a fish smoothie?
But this isn't for a new health food diet. It's for someone else's benefit.
It looks like a chocolate milkshake, but it doesn't really smell like one.
Jelena checks out a place nursing marine mammals back to good health.
And using satellites to study our ocean. Are they really heating up?
80 or 90% of the heat that's trapped from man-made greenhouse gases actually goes into warming the oceans.
NASA scientists look into the past and predict the future. More Eco Company is still ahead.
Welcome back to Eco Company.
So imagine if someone trashed your home.
As you saw in our first story, that's exactly what we are doing to our oceans.
And it's not a good thing for marine life.
Well, Jelina's found a place where they're nursing injured mammals back to good health.
I'm here at the Marine Mammal Center, where animals like this are saved every single day with help from a dedicated team of volunteers. Let's go see how they do it. Say hello to Crunchy, Nantucket, and Taylor's Day. Just a few of the patients being treated at the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, California.
Each one of these animals is unique, and we learn so much from them about their species and about their ocean.
The center rescues and rehabilitates sick and injured marine animals found along 600 miles of California's coast. And over the past 35 years, the numbers added up to more than 16,000 sea lions, harbor seals, and other species.
We don't get dolphins very often, but when we do, they're very difficult to care for. This was Baker D. When he came in, he was so weak and sick that he couldn't even swim on his own. We had volunteers in the pool 24 hours a day holding him up so he could breathe.
That's what we call dedication. And it worked because after about 2 months, Baker D was back home in the ocean. Marine science instructor Doreen Garola says it's just one of the many success stories here. So how many animals can you keep here?
That'll depend on the types of animals that we have. We've had over 120 to 130 animals on site at one time.
Some, like these sea lions, are here because they're sick. Others are here because they've become victims of our trash.
We get a disturbingly high number of animals that have been injured by marine debris, usually by entanglement, sometimes by ingestion.
Whether injured or sick, they're all treated by a dedicated group of 800 volunteers.
From age 14 to 93, they're all responsible for either rescuing the animals, caring for the animals, and teaching the public.
One of these volunteers is high school student David Krusik.
So I've been volunteering here at the Marine Mammal Center for almost 2 years now.
David is by far an exemplary volunteer. He has been so enthusiastic.
The oceans connect all of us at once, and that is where the passion lies for me.
One of his jobs is to help feed the animals, and sometimes it's a bit tricky. So with all the marine mammals here, I bet you have to have a lot of fish to feed them.
Absolutely. In the busy season, we go through 1,000 pounds a day. So this is an area that we affectionately call our fish kitchen.
David's showing me how to make a fish smoothie. It looks like a chocolate milkshake, but it doesn't really smell like one. Other fish get their meds this way.
It's the only way they get their meds, put it in their food.
These sea lions are being treated for 2 things. One is a common kidney virus, so they take extra care by suiting up and scrubbing down.
They're mammals, just like us, and so a lot of the same diseases they get, we can get as well.
Others have what's called domoic acid intoxication, and if it sounds bad, that's because it is.
It's a neurotoxin produced by a specific type of algae that grows here off the California coast.
In low doses, the naturally occurring toxin is no problem, but too much exposure can cause brain damage.
They're not able to find food, they're confused about direction, so they may end up just swimming out in random directions and starving to death out in the middle of the open ocean.
It's something they're seeing more and more cases of.
The best theory right now is because of fertilizer runoff. There have been really intense and concentrated blooms over the last 10 plus years or so.
Scientists refer to them as harmful algal blooms. Some people may refer to them as red tide.
And so as a result, these animals are getting a huge amount of this toxin in the system. The current theory is that indeed we are causing these increased concentrations of the blooms of this algae, which are what makes it dangerous for these animals.
One problem out there that's man-made, no question about it, is this stuff, our trash.
This is a fishing lure, big fishing lure we took off of D-Day back in 2004. The hook was caught in his mouth.
And what's this? This was found on an animal?
Yep, that was found on an animal.
They nicknamed him Michelin. Then there's Spanish Springs.
He swallowed a plastic bag. And how frequently do you go shopping and use a plastic bag? If it doesn't get disposed of properly, it might end up in the stomach of one of these guys.
Abigail got caught in a fishing line. Ducked somehow ended up entangled in tape. And the list doesn't end here. Balloons are even a problem.
If you let go of balloons after a birthday party, they'll float out over the ocean and then pop. And then you've got these stringy bits of stretchy plastic that are just horrible for the animals to get caught in. It happens far too frequently. It's not a nice thing when you see happy birthday wrapped around an animal's neck.
So the message here is don't let your trash get into the ocean.
Exactly. If you don't dispose of your garbage or fishing equipment or any plastics properly, they'll end up in the ocean eventually, and they'll stay there for hundreds of years, and probably will end up causing the death of a few animals along the way.
The lucky ones get spotted and brought here.
These animals are amazing survivors. They will come in with, debris cut into their neck or around their flippers or somewhere entangled around their body. Our veterinarians skillfully are able to remove these different types of entanglement, and the animals have an amazing ability to heal.
In a matter of days, weeks, or a couple of months, most end up back where they belong.
Go home.
Tagged so they can be tracked.
Everybody who works up here is emotionally invested in some way, and so every time an animal is released, it's very special, and every time an animal dies, it's very, very sad.
Two very different endings to a story. One these volunteers hope will inspire others to protect marine animals, and the place they call home.
The oceans are big. What goes on in them affects every single person on the planet, and the problems we see here are just a tiny fraction of things that we're doing to harm the oceans, which in turn harms us.
So if people are aware of their actions, from where their garbage goes to how they act on the beach or when they're out on the ocean, know that you can make a positive impact in this animal's life.
Coming up in our next segment,
NASA scientists tackle the question of rising sea levels.
is it really happening? We'll find out.
More Eco Company is straight ahead.
Welcome back to Eco Company.
There's another group of researchers with their eyes on the ocean, NASA's finest.
They're compiling data from 11 satellites to look at trends and predict the future.
Adam met up with one scientist seeing how climate change is affecting our ocean.
And he says it's getting warmer out there.
Oceans cover 2/3 of Earth's surface. So how are they affected by climate change? That's what we're here to find out.
Think the beach is a great place to hang out? Well, what if they were all to disappear?
This is happening all around the world. We're losing our beaches, our coastlines are eroding, and sea level is definitely rising.
That's Josh Willis, an oceanographer with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He studies ocean water temperatures around the globe using technology from both space and at sea. And that makes him a guy to listen to when it comes to climate change.
What happens when we emit CO2 in the atmosphere is it stays for a very long time, and it traps some of the outgoing heat that would otherwise escape into space. This trapped heat warms the ocean, warms the planet, melts the glaciers and ice sheets, and is the driver for sea level rise and climate change.
Willis is part of a team that's trying to figure out just what the oceans are telling us, and what it means for the future.
Because it turns out that 80 or 90% of the heat that's trapped from man-made greenhouse gases actually goes into warming the oceans. So if you're not really measuring the warming of the oceans, you really aren't measuring the biggest signal in climate change.
Willis says disappearing coastlines are a big indicator that something's amiss. Namely, it's getting warmer out there.
Definitely since the early 90s, we can see the oceans warming as a result of human-caused climate change.
That's where all the concern about sea level rise comes in. It's basic physics. When water heats up, it expands, takes up more space, and suddenly you've got more water to deal with. So warmer temperatures account for 1/3 of sea level rise. The rest is caused by melting ice in the Arctic.
So whenever ice sheets melt, whenever glaciers melt, and this water finds its way back into the ocean, it raises the level of the oceans as well. So about 2/3 of current sea level rise is actually from this melting of land ice. The Larsen B ice shelf, which you may remember from several years ago, broke up. That ice shelf was almost 10,000 years old. It had been there since at least the last ice age. We're seeing these events that are happening that haven't been occurring. It hasn't been this warm and we haven't had this much ice loss anytime in the last several thousand years.
NASA's GRACE satellite, which measures ice loss on continents, shows us the situation's no joke.
One of the places we can see ice loss is Greenland. Greenland is the second biggest ice sheet on the planet, and it holds enough water to raise sea level by something like 20 feet.
It's a 1-2 punch that has many researchers concerned.
We're definitely looking at sea level rise in the next 100 years. The big question for researchers now is how much?
While there may be some questions still to answer, Willis says one thing's for certain.
It's going to be a warmer planet, and we're going to have higher sea levels.
We'll see it.
We'll definitely see it. We can already see it in our lifetime in many ways.
Something to think about next time you hit the beach.
From Willie McCovey Plaza, that wraps things up this week on Eco Company. Thanks for tuning in.
For more on these stories or info about the show, head to eco-company.tv.
And don't forget to pitch in to be part of the solution.
We'll see you next time
on Eco Company.